Thank you, Ms. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2691 on third and final consideration.
Representative Clemmons, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a very important piece of legislation on such a non-important piece of legislation. This amendment would make sure that we are protecting Yetis or Sasquatch or Bigfoot from whatever this conspiracy theory is that we're passing in this legislation. And as most of my colleagues probably understand coming from me, this legislation is not to be taken seriously. This amendment's not to be taken seriously. And so I'll withdraw the amendment, and I would ask the sponsor of the bill to withdraw his bill because it shouldn't be taken seriously.
As it is documented that the federal government or other entities acting on the federal government's behalf or at the federal government's request may conduct geoengineering experiments by intentionally dispersing chemicals into the atmosphere, and those activities may occur within the state of Tennessee. And whereas it is documented among those within the pseudoscience of cryptozoology that there exists a large, hairy, human-like creature that inhabits forests in North America. And whereas this creature is commonly referred to as a Yeti, Bigfoot, or Sasquatch. Tennessee Code Annotated Title 68, Chapter 201, Part 1 is amended by adding the following as a new section: the intentional injection, release, or dispersion of any means of chemicals, chemical compounds, substances, or apparatus within the borders of this state into the atmosphere with the express purpose of affecting temperature, weather, or the intensity of sunlight, which may threaten the Sasquatch in its natural habitat, is prohibited.
The esteemed chairman who has filed this amendment, I mean, you asked legal to write it. You presented it. My question to you, sir, and it's a serious question. You brought the amendment, not us. Do you believe in Bigfoot?
About as much as I believe in a conspiracy theory about chemtrails. But as you can read in the amendment, it refers to those who do believe in Bigfoot. Unfortunately, I am not those within the pseudoscience of cryptozoology.
And of course, hearing this piece of legislation in the Agriculture Committee, and of course, testimony from a doctor out of East Tennessee, the discussion came to silver iodide, and they use that for seed clouding, creating it to rain. But the question for the amendment sponsor, we know that it will cause birth defects and cancer in human beings. Will it do likewise in Sasquatch?
Representative
Chairman Clemmons, can you talk about this pseudoscientific group of people and what it is they believe about chemtrails? I know you're not a part of that group, but what are the consequences of people believing sort of these conspiracy theories and its effect?
We do have a lot of issues that are going into our atmosphere that are man-made, unfortunately, a lot of abuse of our environment and our natural environment. We want to protect, all of our nature and organisms and living organisms and environmental welfare from broad-scale harm that is taking place across the country. And it's unfortunate that we are focused on these conspiracy theory type ideas being the cause for some.
Colleagues, if you look up this, the first things that you're going to see is that the chemtrail conspiracy theory is erroneous belief that long-lasting condensation trails left in the sky by high-flying aircraft are actually chemtrails consisting of chemical or biological agents sprayed for nefarious purposes undisclosed to the general public. And in this amendment, and also it's in the initial amendment, you sort of share some similar language. It is talking about the federal government potentially using its power and authority to disperse chemicals into the atmosphere, and that those activities might be occurring in the state of Tennessee. And so, sponsor, do you know of any case at all from the Department of Environment and Conservation or otherwise where the federal government is actually spraying chemicals on people in our state?
Do not, nor have I ever heard of anything such.
Do you believe that the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, who is responsible for monitoring air, soil, and water quality, regulating industrial and agricultural emissions into the air, soil, and water within the state of Tennessee, would have notified the General Assembly if there were instances where the federal government was intentionally dispersing chemicals into our atmosphere?
would be confident that Commissioner Hatcher or one of the other commissioners would have raised this very serious issue, given that agriculture is such a driving force in our economy across the state of Tennessee. If there was something like this being done that would be harmful to the population or our crops or our livestock across the state of Tennessee or our soil, I'm confident that, well, I would like to think the Lee administration would have made us aware of that.
This legislation as amended adds new section to the Tennessee Air Quality Act, prohibiting the intentional injection, release, or dispersion of chemicals, chemical compounds, substances, or apparatus into our atmosphere within the borders of the state of Tennessee for the express purpose of affecting temperature, weather, and the intensity of solar radiation. The Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation is the agency responsible for the enforcement of the Tennessee Air Quality Act. I work closely with them in writing this amendment language before you today. Why is this legislation needed? In June of 2023, a 44-page report titled Congressionally Mandated Research Plan and Initial Research Governance Framework Related to Solar Radiation Management, Solar Radiation Modification, was published and posted on the White House website at whitehouse.gov. Members, I would offer to you, much as I did in committee, it bothers me to have to bring this legislation to you. It bothers me further that we would take something as serious as clean air, clean water, and clean soil to grow our crops in and make a laughingstock of it with an amendment here tonight. I'm sad to see that the Tennesseans that are watching this tonight might see that some members in this House don't take serious their health. And I think that is quite indeed a travesty. I have several cited resources from both the news channels, ABC and MSNBC, to Yale.edu documents that lay out a long history of injection of aerosols into our atmosphere with the hope of controlling the temperature of the earth. We had a young man come and testify against this bill in committee, for those of y'all that were here. He runs a business who does cloud seeding. It only takes a bit of research to understand the history of 5 decades of cloud seeding, where compounds like silver iodide are injected at atmosphere levels from 3,000 to 18,000 feet to induce increased snowfall or rainfall. There are 8 states currently in the United States that participate in this. I would offer you, colleagues, that everything that goes up must come down. And those chemicals that we knowingly and willingly inject into the atmosphere simply to control the weather or the climate are affecting our health and have the potential to. So I submit to you that this is a very common sense thing to do and that we should prohibit it in the state of Tennessee.
We sat in committee and there's a young man that came from out west who has a company where he's spraying these components up into our atmosphere, and what it does is it attracts moisture molecules, and you can't attract that unless it's taking it from somewhere else. So where you're trying to manipulate the weather and the rainfall, you're trying to block the sunlight, this is something that has already taken place. And when we sat down and had conversations as this was going through the committee process, a lot of the states that you're seeing this legislation where it's already being impacted out west, where they're trying to manage drought management with it, are the same states where you're seeing major flash flooding and you're seeing severe droughts out there as well. So I just want to thank the sponsor for having the foresight to be able to file this on time. And I greatly appreciate that and support your legislation. We can't take it and put legislation or not put legislation forward when it's going to be to the benefit of our agriculture, our farmers that are out there. And this right here will definitely protect our farmers here in the state of Tennessee.
And so I would offer to my colleague that this is a known thing. There's no secret. It's absolutely well published. You can certainly go to any of the sources, the cited sources, to research this and understand fully that there is an intent and a plan. I suspect that some of those that have these plans with the solar radiation modification intend to try to reflect the sun's rays from the earth by injecting these chemicals, chemical compounds, substances, and apparatus into the upper atmosphere. I would offer to you that that seems risky. Let's just look simply at the silver iodide. Silver iodide used in the cloud seeding, which again, I would encourage my colleagues who are skeptical of this to go and do a little research on that compound. You'll find that that silver iodide is injected into clouds to change the density of the clouds with a hope that precipitation can be increased as a result of such. Going back to my earlier statement, I would offer that what goes up must come down. When we inject those aerosol compounds and chemical compounds into our atmosphere, they are coming down onto us. I would hope that all my colleagues are in favor of clean air, clean water, and clean soil in the state of Tennessee. I certainly am. With that, we have 3 routes of entry for these chemicals and chemical compounds into our bodies: inhalation, ingestion, and absorption. And as those chemical compounds do come back to the earth, we'll find that we have either ingested those in our water or our food as they've contaminated the water and the soil, or we will inhale those compounds without knowing the exact impact onto our bodies. And finally, I would offer that there's a good possibility that those chemical compounds could be absorbed into our skin as they do come in from the atmosphere. So with that, and to my colleague, I would offer that you do some homework and see that this is actually a real thing.
We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2691 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 70, 22 nay, 1 present not voting.
Senate Bill 20